Hello, Changemakers, and welcome to Mindset Live. I'm Kara, and I'll be your Mindset Live trainer today. Today, we're talking all about failure. Now, before you get depressed and decide that you don't want to watch anything that has to do with failure, stick with me here, because today we're talking about some really important insights and little golden nuggets that are contained anytime we experience a setback or things don't go as planned. And yet so many of us are so afraid of failure, we're so afraid of getting it wrong, that we just decide that it's worth giving up. So we'll understand and learn a little bit today about how the brain works, how it's hardwired to kind of protect us from failure and from repeated failures over and over, but also how we can use that information, how we can use that information to outsmart ourselves so that we can use failure for all the important and powerful lessons it contains. And it's my hope that by the end of today's session that you will feel confident, that you will understand that you can use any of these setbacks, and anytime that things go wrong, you can use it to get really important pieces of information that you can continue to apply to make progress toward your goals. So as people continue to join us, let's turn to our Mindset Live ritual of practicing gratitude. You know, it's more important than ever. I think we've been surrounded a lot lately by a lot of fearful and anxiety-inducing messages. And so anytime we can kind of blow up and increase the likelihood that we see good things all around us, the better we're going to feel. And so gratitude is a great practice for doing just that. It's about naming something good in your life right now, big or small. It can be something or someone. So if you're willing to play along, if you could just use your chat box and let me know something that you're grateful for right here in this moment, and I'll share one of mine while you're going ahead and typing in your chat box. So I'm really grateful for summertime mornings. My family is a family of early risers. And recently, we've taken advantage of the fact that everyone's up early to go out and get some activity in. So we've gone on some walks, and today we went to an extreme park. It's a skateboard park, so our kids could practice their skateboarding skills. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to have that kind of reset first thing in the morning, where we're all spending time together and then out enjoying the summer weather without necessarily the summer heat. So what about you? What are some of the things that you're grateful for? Let's see what you're saying. Oh, grateful for my husband. It's his birthday today. Well, happy birthday to your husband. I hope he is being celebrated and reminded of all the ways he is a special person in the lives of so many. So that's fantastic. Jenny is grateful for long days of sunlight. Yeah, right? All of a sudden there's more possibility when the sun is out and you know, you look outside and you're like, what time is it? Oh, it's 8:30 and I can still go out and play and have some fun. I love it. What else do we have? Grateful for a delicious lunch. Absolutely. Anytime we can take the time to nourish our body during the course of the day, that feels good. Avery's grateful her parents have a pool. Avery, I would be happy if my parents had a pool too, especially if you have heat like we have these days here. So these are fantastic. I love that what's coming in here. A lot of you are grateful for the summer weather and summer-like temperatures. So if you're not experiencing that in your neck of the woods, hopefully you will be too, or at least get some of that sunshine, because it does so much to lift our mood. So thank you for sharing those, you guys. And the more you can notice what's good in your life, the more we can practice that gratitude, the more we can see that no matter what we might think in our mind or what might be surrounding us in the news, we can always find the good in this moment and stay grounded and centered on that. So I mentioned that one of the things I was most grateful for was the fact that we took our kids to this extreme park this morning. And I want to start with this story of something that happened there, because our daughters are 8 and 10 and they're new to skateboarding. They've been doing this for maybe a month. So it's not a skill that and neither of them feel really comfortable with. But they wanted to go and check out this skate park. Well, I mean, as you can imagine, it's called an extreme park. So you know, there was lots of opportunities for tricks and turns and all kinds of things that were way outside their skill level, and lots of really great skateboarders and people on bikes doing all kinds of fantastic things. And so at first our kids were really intimidated, but they found, you know, like little ramps, and they found little areas where they could kind of work on one skill over and over again. And so as my 10-year-old was sitting there practicing going down this one hill, you know, she kept on saying things like, I'm afraid I'm gonna fall. And we kept on reminding her, well, you know, you might, like that. This is the part of practice that makes it difficult and scary, but the only way to know is to try. So she was working at something and fell off her board a couple of times, and the board got away from her a couple of times. And there was somebody who was really talented skateboarding near us, and he was much older. And then he stopped and he was kind of watching her. And then she got it. She got the hill and she kind of turned and moved a little bit and, turned her body back toward where she was facing. And you could see her face light up. She was so excited, so proud of herself. And she picked up her board and she walked back up, and he said to her, "Did you pay attention?" And she said, "What?" And he said, "Good job. Now, did you pay attention?" And he was trying to tell her that, by paying attention to what goes right, we can repeat that over and over again. He said, but the important trick is anytime you're practicing, pay attention, because when you get it wrong, you'll know what you did wrong and you can avoid that. And when you do something right, you can repeat that. And so that's how you learn. You can't be in your head, worrying about if you're going to get it right or not. You've got to be in the moment paying attention. And so I thought to myself, wow, that's a really powerful point for them to hear. Because when they walked in, they were intimidated. They saw everyone doing everything correctly, and they didn't see the years of practice that each of those people had in that skate park to get them to that place, right? And so the important things that are to remember is that we're going to fail our way to success. It's bound to happen. And I'm sure many of you have already failed your way to success in your life right now. So if you're willing to share, what's one thing in your life that you kind of had to fail your way to success for? Maybe it was something like riding a bike or learning a new skill. Maybe it was something related to parenting or work. But if you could use your chat box, can you let me know something that you had to fail your way through in order to be successful? So what are we saying here? All right, so I see, Jim said he had to fail his way to success in swimming. Swimming's a really important one, right? I think that's one many of us can relate to. I know that swimming was a really hard exercise for me, and sometimes I still feel like maybe if I'm in the water, it looks like the water's winning. But yeah, you've got to practice. It takes a lot of skill development. Craig says, I failed at learning how to serve a tennis ball. Okay, Craig. Yeah, that's another skill. And piano just popped up there. So cooking, cooking for sure. Many burned pots, I don't know if those were meals or pots, but either way, I think we've all tried something new and not been successful at that. Learning Zoom calls and just technology with everything that's shifted lately. Absolutely. Okay, so here we have evidence, and you have evidence in your own life of things that maybe you tried and worked toward and then didn't get right the first time. And so what I want you to remember is that does not define whether or not you will ever be successful. What it teaches us is resilience, the ability to keep trying, keep applying ourselves so that we can actually learn from that, right? We can learn to overcome those obstacles and those difficulties until we reach success. And yet so many people, I think, when it comes to changing their eating habits, or they don't necessarily think about, well, I have to have this same level of commitment and keep working through this habit because it seems a lot easier. It's not as complicated a skill maybe as, playing the piano or riding a bike. But yet it is complicated. And so here's what I want us to do today. I want us to understand what happens when we tell ourselves we failed in our brain. And then I want us to look at all the failures and setbacks and anytime things have gone wrong through a different filter. So first, anytime that you kind of register in your mind that you failed, the researchers have found that there's a part of the brain called the habenula that kind of triggers. It's kind of like a scorekeeper for failure. And so anytime that goes off, your brain decreases motivation for doing that behavior again because your brain wants to keep you safe. It wants to keep you from repeating things that aren't working. That's great if you're walking out into the street and getting hit by a car. That's keeping you safe. But when it comes to understanding how to not overindulge in snack foods at night, it doesn't necessarily make the same amount of sense. So what I want us to think about is that when we're talking about failure, first, let's not call it a failure. Let's just understand that there's something there that didn't work, that didn't go well for us, right? Then the other piece of this is also recognize what you're saying to yourself internally when something goes wrong. So for example, if you end up overeating the chips or indulging mindlessly at night when you're stressed, and then you say to yourself, I blew it, I'm a stress eater, right? If we start to attach our identity to something like that, it's going to be harder for us to separate the behavior from who we are. And so instead of saying something like, wow, I have a habit of eating when I'm stressed, that's a very different scenario than I am a stress eater. And so when we see that it's just a habit that we have, well, then we're much more likely to look at it from a position of being able to change. And that's the key. I want us to understand what would happen if we, instead of looking at when things go wrong and these setbacks, instead of looking at them as failures, if we looked at it through the filter of a practice mindset. So instead of it being a failure, maybe it could be an insight. Maybe it could teach us something about what's working and not working. And maybe if we start to pay attention, then we can decide not to do those things again, or maybe arrange it so that those things aren't constantly tripping us up. So for example, maybe one day you find that you're just feeling tired, you're exhausted. And so you end up snacking on food, because you're trying to keep yourself awake. And there's some research here. Research has shown that when we are sleep deprived, even 1 hour short of the recommended 7 to 9 hours a night, that we end up eating on average about 350 more calories. It's as though we're trying to eat ourselves awake, right? So you're tired, now you're snacking to stay awake, and instead you're like, I blew it. Well, what if instead you said, wow, what was really behind that? What was I feeling? How was I feeling in that moment? And then maybe you can start to recognize that every time that you're really tired, you end up overeating the next day. And so maybe that's a decision you can make about, okay, well, maybe I should start trying to get more sleep rather than expecting myself to make different choices but still feeling the same way. Or it could be another feeling state. Maybe you're lonely, or you're feeling totally isolated with, how much sheltering in place and things that have been happening lately. So instead of, just going, wow, I can't stop myself from eating, I'm just seeking out comfort food, maybe you can go, wow, I find that when I really am feeling this way, when I'm feeling lonely, that I need more comfort food. And so maybe I should address the loneliness rather than expecting myself to not seek out comfort in this way. Maybe I could find comfort in other ways. So we can start to see some insight. And the same is true for maybe the environment we find ourselves in. I know for myself, anytime I go to my mom's house, she loves to bake. She will have baked goods in her freezer. Odds are they're in the refrigerator, they're likely out on the counter. And so the second I walk into her house, I'm sort of primed to look for what goodies are gonna be around, right? And especially if she knows we're coming, then there's definitely gonna be goodies around. But if I ask myself to not make those choices in that environment, I'm really setting myself up for failure, right? But if I recognize hey, I'm gonna go to my mom's house, there's gonna be plenty of goodies around, how do I wanna handle this situation? Then I can begin to pay attention to what I need to do to make the best choice for myself. And so it's about awareness around that choice and understanding maybe what we need. And it could be the people that we're with, maybe you have food pushers in your life, people who are really encouraging you, you look great, you don't need to worry about what you're eating, no one eats fruits and vegetables, go with the cookies, those kind of people, if that situation is always going to come up, how will you handle it differently? So it's about recognizing the things that we need so we can see how we can make a different choice in the future. So has any of this kind of prompted anything in your head? I'm curious if any of you have situations where you're like, that's a little insight. Now I recognize that whenever I find myself feeling this way in this environment with these foods in my house, it makes it harder for me to stick to the choices I desire. So can I see in the chat box maybe what some of those examples might look like for you? So those things coming through? All right, so anytime I buy the cookies at the grocery store, I know I'll indulge in them. And so that's it, right? In one situation, we're buying something in the store and saying, I won't do this, but then we repeatedly keep making that choice and we can start to learn from that. How can we make a different choice next time where we're not necessarily going to indulge in those cookies? Maybe it means you don't buy them at the store. Now, if that's not likely, maybe it means that you can package them into individual portions and tuck them in the freezer. See how that works. So we're constantly looking from this information, this insight from the failures and setbacks, and we're using it to keep on practicing new strategies. So Mary Ellen says, for me, if ice cream is in the house, I eat it and rationalize that I should just finish it so it's no longer around. Mary Ellen, you sound very familiar to somebody I know quite well, right? So yeah, like when we have the ice cream in the house and we're like, oh, I'm just gonna get rid of it, so I'll just eat it all right here. What can we learn from that? Are there certain situations that make us want to eat all of the ice cream? Are there other ways and strategies we can use to eat less ice cream? And so it's applying that kind of insight that we learn, understanding how we were feeling, why we made the choice we made, and what made it so difficult, and then seeing if we can't tweak and practice moving forward. So this is the key. I want you to remember that it's about the practice. There is no one time, place, or point in your life where it's decided there and then that you can't move forward. We always have the opportunity to keep practicing, to keep iterating and trying. And so let's take that information, that insight that we gain when things don't go as planned, and use it to create a different future, a different tomorrow for ourselves. So as we're looking at applying this in a really generous way, moving forward with a sense of generosity, how can we take this information and feel good about it and share it with others? One thing I would encourage you to do is that if you notice that somebody is struggling, that they're working hard at changing something and they feel like they're struggling a bit, just remind them that they can stay in that effort, that they're doing a great job and that you see the effort. And as long as they keep practicing, as long as they keep trying, they can make it happen. So that's it for me today, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week.